Salfalava, and welcome to the Data-Driven Decision-Making side event. And this side event is organized by the Inform project of SPREP, a project which is implemented in 14 Pacific Island countries. So the side events will take the formats of a panel discussion, more like a Talanoa session. Now it is my pleasure to introduce all three panelists. Mr. Paul Anderson is the Inform project manager at SPREP. We also have Mr. Snyder Bisa of the Federated States of Micronesia and Mr. Richard Balone of Papua New Guinea. Talofa. The panelists will share respective experiences on actions taken to use data to support decision-making at regional and national levels. Also, for our participants, please note that you are encouraged to post your questions to the panelists. And we also have a live poll for this session. And at the end of the Talanoa session, my colleague Peter will go through the polling results and wrap up the session with key points and messages from the discussion. Now I hand over to Paul to start off the introductory remarks from the panelists. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel for joining us and all the participants out there around the world. My name is Paul again, and I have the pleasure of working with the SPREP national counterparts to enhance conservation outcomes through the use of data to improve decision-making, to improve planning, to improve reporting. And I've also had the opportunity to work on a long-standing issue that I've seen and others have as well about data preservation and discovery. For decades, good information in the Pacific has been gathered, used once, and oftentimes never seen again. So over the last 2.5 years, colleagues like Richard and Snyder have made available 11,000 data sets for public consumption. They're published online now in national data portals in FSM, Papua New Guinea, and 12 other Pacific Island nations. So I'm here to provide that context and really listen to my colleagues talk about their experiences and answer any of your questions. Thank you so much. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Paul. And I invite Snyder, please. If you can introduce yourself and put context to the work that you do in FSM. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Good day, everyone. Kasililia from island of Pohnpei in the Federated States of Micronesia. My name is Snyder Bisa. I'm working with the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Emergency Management at the National Government of the Federated States of Micronesia. My role at the department, I work as the GIS officer for the department and data officer, also overseeing the FSM Inform data portal that Paul mentioned earlier. Thanks to SPREP for assisting FSM and the other island countries in having such a wonderful and useful, important data portal for storing and centralizing all our environment data. So my role at the department is to oversee the data portal in coordination with our state counterparts from each of the state, where each state are responsible in sharing and uploading their environment data sets, also data stories, policies, and so forth on our data portal. So it's a great opportunity, and thanks to SPREP for giving me the opportunity to be on this panel and share what we have here in the FSM. Thank you.
Thank you, Snyder. And now I invite Richard for your introduction.
Good afternoon from Papua New Guinea, everyone, wherever you are. Firstly, we'd like to thank SPREP for inviting Papua New Guinea to be on this panel and the conversation about data and the importance of data in biodiversity and conservation matters. I work with the Conservation Environment Protection Authority, the agency responsible for environmental data in Papua New Guinea. I work as the IT manager, but I also look after data and a bigger part is assisting the technical wings in putting in business systems that support their work. And I'm also part of the Inform project in Papua New Guinea and one of those administrators in the PNT data portal. So it is a great pleasure to be in this conversation right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Saman. So we now move on to the next part of our program, which is to show, to provide an overview of the Inform project, and we're going to screen a video for you. And I'll now ask our IT to facilitate that for us. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for watching this video on the Inform project. In the Pacific, all countries need to do regular reporting on the environment, including reporting on multiple indicators. But for this, you need data. A lot of data. Finding all this data is usually a challenge.
This is where Inform comes in. Inform supports 14 Pacific Island countries with data access and sharing. Like this, we create a regional network for environmental information. We set up data portals to store and share information. We support data analysis. A reporting tool was developed for indicator-based reporting. We encourage a change in business practices around sharing information. Sharing data makes for better and easier reporting, which leads to more informed decision-making.
More information can be found on the following website. We hope you will be part of this exciting project.
Thank you. So this part of the our program for today, I'm going to, as your moderator, I'm going to ask a series of questions to each of the panelists. And then after that, we'll then go to the Q&A to see if there are any questions that are posted on Q&A, and then we'll ask those questions of the panel. Now, the first question is to Paul. Paul, what are the efforts at the regional level to support the state of environment reporting, as well as MEA reporting and planning for a more resilient future?
Thank you very much for the question. Appreciate that. Well, first I want to start out by saying, you know, we've been tracking progress toward environmental outcomes for some time. And some of the things we've been tracking, we have a good time step, a history of data. So about 11 years ago, we did an update on the proportion of area in the Pacific that's protected. And we had about 500,000 square kilometers. I'm happy to say that in the last 11 years, that's increased to over 6 million square kilometers of area. So fantastic progress. And to make statements like that and plan nationally and regionally, we really have to have some information, some process data to help us track that progress, set new and realistic goals, and address areas that we're not delivering on. So this project that we're working on, and particularly the efforts in the countries, has led us to develop this national state of environment reporting process. The intent there is to use a small set of well-designed indicators to talk about key aspects of the environment that are necessary for planning, for reporting, and for new project and initiative development. So SPREP, with the help of the 14 countries involved in the project, we've developed around 31 indicators. And I can say that the majority of the countries have now either developed national SOEs or are in the process of developing them. In some countries, like Samoa, is in the process of reviewing and updating their most recent SOE. The nice thing about these national state of environment reports and the core indicators within them is that they're mapped directly to multilateral environment agreement requirements, commitments, and reporting needs, as well as SDGs, particularly SDG 14, 15, parts of 12, parts of 6. So when you get something like protected areas, you need that information for national planning and reporting, as well as reporting to CBD ACHI Target 11, as well as SDG 14.5.1 and 15.2.1. So essentially, this consolidation of information and data in national data portals and through analysis in the national SOEs allows for countries to better, more easily track their progress, spend less time on reporting to their international commitments and more time on implementation. So yeah, thank you very much for that opportunity. If that raises any questions, if I missed a part of the question, I'd be happy to follow up.
On the indicators that you mentioned, if you can talk a little bit more about the indicators and maybe perhaps provide some examples of what some of these indicators that that you're using at the regional level and are being applied at the national level as well. Some examples?
Certainly, thank you for the opportunity. So there's the indicators divided up into 7 thematic areas: atmosphere and climate, culture and heritage, biodiversity, land, coastal and marine. And some of the indicators are things like proportion of coral reefs, live coral reef cover. That is a good indicator because it's a proxy for a bunch of other things. With a single number, if that's stable or increasing, you can tell that the coral reefs are doing well. And if it's stable or declining, you get an indication that something's going wrong. Water quality, turbidity, fecal coliform bacteria in freshwater is a good indication of either good land use management or poor management. High fecal coliform bacteria is an indication of poor sanitation. And so we try to pick indicators that can answer questions about a number of things that we care about, because each indicator is time consuming and costly to access the data, to analyze the information, and to put it together. So yeah, there's indicators in a suite of different thematic areas. A bunch of the SOEs are now online on the national data portals, and I would invite any of our audience who's interested to visit one of the national data portals and have a look at the SOE. There's a summary of the indicators, what they mean, how they're measured, and where you can find more data about each individual one. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And just one more follow-up question, Paul. And if you recall, on the first day of the conference at the opening, there was a presentation on the regional state of environment and conservation reports. Can you talk a little bit about that and the use of indicators to inform that report, please?
Thank you, Easter. This is something that we're really proud of. It's been a real challenge to synthesize the condition of the environment across such a vast and diverse area as the Pacific Ocean and the 14 countries and 7 territories that are within it. We've been using as a primary data source for the regional state of environment and conservation, the national SOEs, because those are vetted national documents that talk about the condition of the environment in each country. And we've been using those as a data source to pull together what protected area management looks like in the Pacific, what invasive species management looks like in the region, how forest cover over the region and within the subregions is doing. And we do find some interesting disparities with forest cover in Micronesia remaining more stable and in Melanesia decreasing at a more rapid rate. So this regional state of environment report gives us a jumping off point for this conference, so we can better plan for our post-2020 agenda, as well as a kind of summary of how the Pacific Island countries are doing. So that document, also online on the conference website, on the regional data portal. It's an advanced copy, so there's still some improvements being made, but we'd be pleased if you took a look at it, reviewed the indicators. We'd love to get feedback on that document. It's been a long time in the works, and we're really proud to have it come out in time for this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Now, let's go to PNG, and I would like to ask Richard a question. Richard, can you talk us through the steps in developing a national environment data policy for PNG, including some of the important lessons that you learned through that process? Thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity and for this wonderful question. We developed this policy for internal use to facilitate the national concern, which is the accessibility of data. The background to this development of this policy is that when we were in the process of developing or writing up the state of environment report through the Inform project, because that's the first of its kind for Papua New Guinea as well, or the first time, we were looking for data, and we realized 80 to 85% of the data were from our key external stakeholders or agencies, and 15 to 20% is generated and owned by the organization. That situation created for us to actually go out and look for data. And in the effort to collect data, we were faced with a reality of accessing the specific data that we were requesting for. And most of these challenges taught us, to look back into our organization as well. And even within the organization, there was these challenges of sharing information or letting go of information or data. And the greater challenge was getting that 80% or 85% of data into the organization in a more systematic, more sustainable manner. And when we approached them, they gave, the challenge was there's different organizations existing within different overlapping legislative jurisdictions, and it creates the boundaries to define which data is commercially sensitive, which category of data is not is for public, and there's that lack of standardization, clear national legislation to guide the shareability of the data even within public sector, the public machineries or agencies. And also we were told that SIPA or the organization as a responsible authority, we do not easily give them data when requested. So we came back to the table and said, there's a policy gap need that we need to address. Although there are the rules enabling legislation and bylaws that are there, but they're not clear. So we decided to create that trust, to create that confidence for our stakeholders as well as within the organization, so that there's that smooth transition or smooth exchange of data with key stakeholders as well as within the organization. So yeah, those were some of the driving factors behind creating or developing that data sharing policy. And we were fortunate enough for UNDP through the cross-cutting project, development project, that where they accepted our request to use some of the outstanding funds if they could be managed by SPREP and UNEP to get something out of it. And thanks SPREP, Paul, and your team to agree to manage those remaining funds. And one of them is the outcome is the data sharing policy. We were able to hire or procure a specialist consulting firm which we had the privilege of having in the country over a month. And then we started developing this policy, putting in a field and touch to the realities of Papua New Guinea. They just to address and massage the current challenges that we have. All the staff, the officers from the executive management down to the junior staff were given the opportunity to participate in developing the policy so that we could hone it. So that policy is basically to facilitate the external data request and also to start centralizing data, having some kind of sense of direction or some kind of section trails, all those data that is being shared. At the moment, there's no visible transactions that we could have on our hand. So that's the process behind creating the story behind creating the or developing the data sharing policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you very much for that updates on the BNG's data policy. Now we go to FSM and we'll ask Snyder on how FSM has addressed the issue of data silos across the 4 states. And I think Richard sort of touched on the issue, the challenge of accessing data from different agencies, but we'd like to hear from FSM's experience. Snyder, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. In FSM, I believe we have the same issue and challenge in sharing of data sets among offices, both from national and state level. What we use is we use MOUs between offices in sharing data sets. But with the Inform project, where we now have our own data portal, what we did after the South-South collaboration training we had with Paul and his team, we did a state-to-state training the environment, especially the environment sectors within the within each state, showing them about the portal. So that way, each of the state they control their own data sets. At the same time, each state has their own data user, where they to the responsibility in uploading their data sets that they feel it's ready for public to view it, for public to use. So in that training, we created a data workflow with the states, where there will be one for each state. There will be a data user for the state government, one for conservation offices. So one for also for the NGOs. So the data users for each state, they have the role in uploading the state's data sets per their offices. So for example, for EPA, EPA is our state focal point. So at EPA office for each state, there is only one data user that is responsible for uploading EPA's data sets. So they set their regulations on which data sets are supposed to be uploaded on the data portal. So we set it up that way so that at the state level, each state they take ownership of their own data sets. They control their own data sets. They use the portal to centralize their environment data sets among their groups that we already assigned from the national level. So at the national level, we monitor what the states are uploading, and we also at the same time back up their data sets. So that's what we've been doing, ever since we started uploading data sets in FSM. So I think that is also a good way of sharing data sets, that everything is shared through the data pool, and the states, they're also aware that if their data set that they don't want to share publicly yet, they can set a license to either like private or open it. So they're making use of that option given in the data pool that Info project is assisting us with. So I guess that's our workflow in dealing with the data sets that we have per state, because in FSM we have one nation with 4 different states. Thank you.
Interesting, Snyder, and also given the arrangements in FSM where you have 4 states and you have to work with 4 states as well as the national level. So interesting experience that you have from FSM. Now let's go to the Q&A. We do have a question from Rodney Beard, and I'm going to read it out. Given the reticence of some countries and some organizations in the Pacific to share data, I'm interested in people's views on making use of technologies that use things like federated learning, alternatively synthetic data based on generalized adversarial networks, variational auto-encoders, and other contemporary simulation methods. Now the question is, would Pacific countries have objections to sharing data from such sources? I'll open it to the panel. Any of you can respond to the question from Rodney, please. Paul, you want to take a shot at this?
Sure. Thank you, Eastern. Thank you, Rodney. Hopefully my colleagues from FSM and PNG will jump in because I don't represent a country. However, the place we're starting from is from individual ministries and organizations not sharing published information that has been vetted in the public sphere. It's hard to get. So we've been starting at this very basic level of, can we at least organize and share the resources that we have that we want our government colleagues to use at the national level? Then, as part of this project, we've reached out to other partners, UNESCO and SPC, and when they publish information that's consumable through an API and can be harvested, we pull it to the national data portals if it's tagged with a country. So we're still at a very early stage. Some of even the terminology you're using, I'm not familiar with, so I can't speak to it. But what we have found is that people often trust data sources they know. Papua New Guinea would probably like to use data produced in Papua New Guinea more than something synthesized from an internet source, unless it's very well vetted and presented and it's well understood. I think the same goes for FSM and other countries. If information is being produced in Samoa, it's easier to consume and use at the national level. So our default for the National State of Environment reports has always been national data first, partners second, and other data sets third if nothing else exists. I know that doesn't fully answer your question, but I think it kind of gets at it. Richard, Snyder, if you have any insight into this, please help me out.
Yeah,
All right, thanks. Richard, you want to add to and respond to the question? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I kind of share the same sentiment as Paul. We have encountered experiences where there are public data already on the internet, and we've used API to harvest them. But when we want to use it, the creators or the owners of those data, especially the organization, the institution, agencies, uh, have a different view on it and saying that's a confidential data, you can't use it. So these are the kind of challenges we have, and we're trying to massage it. How can we categorize them as public? How can we categorize them as market sensitive for confidential data? When does that data actually have a due date when it becomes public? This kind of niggling questions, niggling situations are real situations in Papua New Guinea. I think we've in the country we've made a lot of awareness that the published data or published report has to be made available. So at the moment, what we have discovered through the writing of the SOE report is that we've got data everywhere but nowhere, meaning there's no central location or where you can go and get Papua New Guinea data alone. It's everywhere in different portals, sitting in different countries. There's no integration, there's no synchronization. And we appreciate the agreement that SPREP and SPC went into in integrating their systems so that we can have access to those data as well. And that has been a help as well. So I think there are shared published data out there, but the effort is to get those organizations to allow one organization to harvest data on their system and make it available. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you to Richard and Paul for your responses. We do have another question. This is from Helen Rosenbaum. And this is a question for the panelists. How do you envisage such data sets and tools that it would assist specific governments who are considering deep sea mining? Gentlemen? We'll start with Paul, yeah? Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Easter. Deep sea mining, like many issues, has many impacts and is cross-cutting in nature. It's potentially good for economic development. It's potentially devastating to unique deep water ecosystems. And it is an area that few of us have a full picture of. So clearly, we don't have all the answers or even many of them, but ensuring that information, not just on the economic benefits of extracting mineral resources from the seabed, but also on the potential costs, not just to vent ecosystems, but also the potential knock-on effects to surrounding ecosystems that people depend on, fisheries, etc. And making the connection between deep sea mining and the few examples we've seen. There are plans to take the deep sea mining minerals, drop the excess sludge back down, and then take across the reef crest to store on land before shipping out the minerals themselves, thereby potentially putting at risk the nearshore ecosystem. So it's a really fraught and complicated issue, and given our track record of mining on land, something that we want as much information as possible. And I think this links well to the work that our colleagues do at SPREP on environmental impact assessments and looking at the full picture, not just the narrow impact. So this little bit of work that Richard and Snyder and I are talking about doing national SOEs only scratches the surface, but the bigger picture of sharing information and publishing it for everyone to consume, which I'll touch on later hopefully, starts to address that challenge. We don't have mining companies operating with one set of data and community groups, conservationists, and national officers working with something else. we'd like everyone to be able to see the same picture and maybe come up with a solution that benefits everyone and creates as little damage as possible. Thank you, Snyder, Richard. If you have any insight, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. We also have another question from Tiffany, and this question is to Snyder, particularly the data flow that Snyder, that you talked about. So Tiffany's question is there a defined place in that chain, that data flow chain, for NGOs to contribute regularly to the national data system?
All right, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's why I mentioned earlier that when we visited the states and did the workshop and the trainings, we try to also include the NGOs and also the local communities, representative, at least a representative from each of the local communities to join. For each state, there is a group that we created as part of our groups for each state, and that's the NGOs group. So there is one rep per state that is responsible to reach out to the NGOs within each state if they have, an activity or a report or some kind of data that they want to share that they're doing at their community level, or it can be a small NGO within the communities. Then they would have to then share with the with that NGO rep first for that state, and they can then share and upload the data sets on the portal. Accessing the data sets on the portal, it's practically open to everyone, from national all the way down to the communities. So that's why we try to bring in at least a rep from each area or each sector or each level of government to be aware of the portal, and sharing or uploading their data sets. It has to go through the rep. So if the data belongs to a community level, then it is more appropriate to have the NGO rep for that state share their data. So that's our agreed workflow, and how the NGOs are also part of our workflow to contribute to the data system that we have here in the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you, Snyder. There's also a comment from Kirsten McCracker. Data is only as good as the information provided and collected. Advise on providing technical assistance and capacity building for data collection locally that feeds larger data sets. Hybrid top-down and bottom-up. Any reactions and responses to that, panel?
I'll give it a shot. So just to reiterate that we've been starting at a pretty low bar. What information exists we want to use. If data has errors, we've been pretty consistent in the advice. Don't throw it away. Document the caveats. Share your data. Use it and improve on it when you collect it again. We're well aware that there are global, regional, and even national initiatives to collect consistent data sets that Pacific Islands often don't contribute to. There's a number of reasons for that: human resources, financial, technical capacity, etc. We have identified some areas during the course of the project we're implementing that can be more readily improved, particularly in the areas of waste disposal and waste production. But there's other like fairly substantial gaps in data collection that are not easily addressed in a region as vast as the Pacific with such low population density. There's certain areas that are hard to visit, hard to get to and collect information from. So there is now a system to store, share, and publish information. There's a good awareness of what does exist and a good awareness of the gaps. So there's a nice platform to build from to start filling those gaps with consistent methodologies, consistent data collection, and then consistent use of the data. Areas like freshwater quality, the receiving environment from waste, human waste, solid waste, etc. There's several areas where there just is a dearth of information. Air quality, for example, very few sites around the region that could, if it was gathered, flow right into global data sets. However, it has been either neglected or been a low priority for some time. So platform is there, there's interest, but resourcing, geography, and national priorities are some of the reasons that those are still being developed. But I should open the floor to my national colleagues who probably have better insight. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Paul. Richard, you've got your hand up. You want to add to the Paul's comments?
Yes, I'll probably add one or two comments there. Yes, data collection and the data integrity of the data is a big concern for us in the country as well. After we've gone through the SOE writing process, and then we came up with the data sharing policy. Now we've got a lot of other tasks that are coming up, and it's a huge effort. Initiative that's going on is a data management initiative that we are undertaking. So that it gives that level of confidence to the data that we are publishing. And we've got, we're also cleaning up whole data way dating back to the 60s. There are a team that's within the limited limitations. We putting in that effort. It's a huge task for us as a country, because there's a platform that we want to get the information stored, because there's so much data that's in manual form. So yes, there's that top-down and bottom-up approaches, not very efficient, but the processes started. And within our organizations, we've come up with a concept called data champs or data champions. We further went into the members agreed, the staff agreed to create a social club to socialize the idea of data management or data sharing. So that in that, we also look at peer-to-peer learning or training, mentorship and stuff like that. It basically incubate the incubator a lot of data stewards, managers, data analysts, so and bunch of a lot of them, 80 or 90% of them are basically young officers. So we're looking at 5-10 years. We're looking at a lot of upskills, self-trained data stewards or data managers in the long process. So this is going to be a lifelong kind of journey for us now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard, for that elaborate response, sharing PNG's experience. We do have another question from Tiffany. Beyond environmental data, are countries moving toward being able to share data on their expertise and workforce? For example, PNG reports on its higher education, example graduates by field of study, and research workforce to UNESCO, the Global Custodian Agency for SDG 9.5.1 and 0.2 on research, investment, and workforce. Can you comment on the value of that monitoring for PNG, and in your experience, could it be helpful for other countries to track their experts workforce, Richard?
That's going into someone else's jurisdiction, but yeah, I think generally we are faced with a similar kind of situation when it comes to data sharing and making data available for various reports that for national as well as the regional and multi, basically MEAs. I think for the education sector, there's a lot of effort being put in. Business systems have been developed. There's a good grip of that sector by now with the help of technology, both in the tertiary institution as well as the general education sector. So probably, yeah, I think that's what I could say. There's a good uh, environment now for them to actually capture data, store data, probably publish data in the long term. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. There was also a question from Nate Peterson, but Paul has already responded to Nate's question. So we do also have a question from Beikila Buki. Is there any hub for the long-term ecological data or fisheries data in each of the countries in the Pacific? Paul, I think this one is for you.
Thank you, thank you. So depending on which fisheries we're talking about, either inshore or offshore, the tuna or the not tuna, SBC is the lead agency on nearshore fisheries. Information that SBC publishes and is in the public sphere that they put onto their Pacific Data Hub, the national data portals in PNG, FSM, and others now harvest directly to their national data portal. So you'll find the same data in 2 locations. The raw data for fisheries is often thought to be sensitive and is not available publicly, as far as I'm aware. It typically is held either by SBC in Noumea or at the national level with the Fisheries Ministry. That said, fisheries is one of these wonderful cross-cutting issues that is both essential for conservation, biodiversity, public health, nutrition, and for fisheries for income, artisanal fisheries, etc. So the more sharing of that information, and we're very happy that SBC and national fisheries agencies have participated in the state of environment reporting process, gives us a better picture of how nearshore conservation efforts are either achieving their goals or not, and what areas need more work. So yes, there is information. The public information is available in a number of locations. There is more information in actual data sets that are often available, but not to the general public. I hope that helps, and I hope I got it right.
Thanks, thanks, Paul. And this is a Talanoa session, so we have got a good questions coming in from our participants. So we have another one from Tiffany for Paul and our panelists, Richard and Snyder. You mentioned air quality, Paul, where citizen science can provide fabulous inputs, for example, air global assessments that blend data from equipment owned by individuals up to countries. Here again, the value of having a national home for data is that any such efforts could be uploaded and gain visibility. That was a comment to Paul. Now, can Richard or Snyder, now this is a question for Richard and Snyder, could one of you comment on that? And does the availability of data on the portal smooth the path to make a policy response? Who wants to go first? Does the availability of data on the portal smooth the path to make a policy response? So I see Snyder is ready. Yeah, over to you, Snyder.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there, of course, data is a very important aspect in formulating a policy. So yeah, definitely data sets, because without data sets, it would be hard to formulate a policy. I just want to share one of the projects that we're working on, also similar to data sets, focusing on our spatial data sets in the FSM. We're trying to centralize our spatial data sets, and with that project, we identified that there are so many spatial data sets in the FSM, but they're hardly being shared and also used, with other agencies that can see the benefit of using such data sets. So sharing some of those data sets with the Blue Prosperity Coalition that FSM now has, we're formulating a spatial data policy in sharing of data sets within the states as a national, and also with the international, or the Blue Prosperity that is that will be assisting the FSM with its Blue Prosperity Coalition project. So yes, there will be a smooth sail in developing a policy with availability of data sets. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Richard, you want to add?
Yeah, just want to add two comments on that one. For us in Papua New Guinea, we see that integrity and the authenticity of the data is important. We would want a vetting process to make sure that data are complete, because we've seen data that lack those attributes, and we'd like to make sure that data is complete as possible and have that confidence before we approve, especially from private individuals and private sector as well. And for the data portal or data in the portal influencing the national policy responses, I think for the way we see is probably the publication of reports generates some kind of interest from the far wider stakeholders, and that becomes a driving factor for the responsible agencies to develop policies. So for us, this is more a vehicle that we can feed and sustain, so that it kind of gives that push and pull kind of factor to actually for the respective agencies to come up with good policies, because we know for sure that not every data will be published on the portal because of market sensitivity and other confidential attributes to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard and Snyder, for your responses to a question from Tiffany. We only have 5 minutes left. So what we do now is I'm going to hand over to Peter McDonald. He's going to take you through the outcomes of the polling, and also to wrap up our side events with some key points and messages that have come out from the discussion today. Thank you. Over to you, Pete.
Thank you, Esther. Hi, everyone. Pete here from the Inform project. Junie, I'm not sure if it's possible to share the poll results. Otherwise, we can come back to them in a sec. Might just start with a wrap up and then we'll come back to the poll results. So I guess I just wanted to reiterate a point today. We didn't specifically deal with conservation issues, but the point that sound data must underpin conservation decisions shouldn't be underestimated. So without sound data, our decision making becomes essentially guesswork. So just wanted to make that point. So today we learned that while there's a bunch of barriers to data sharing and access to data in the Pacific, there's also an emerging number of tools and processes available that Pacific Island countries are using to overcome those barriers. So from Paul, we learned about the State of Environment reports. Most Pacific Island countries now have a current State of Environment report that is publicly available on the data portals. We also learned there's a network of environment data portals across all the countries with a staggering 11,000 data sets. So that includes reports, GIS files, actual CSV and Excel files. So that's really impressive. In PNG, Richard told us about the tools being used to improve the enabling environment. So Richard shared the statistic that 80% of data is held by other agencies and organizations. So in order to overcome that fairly major hurdle, PNG has established SEPA has established their own data policy and are now working on MOUs to further that process of freeing up the exchange of data. In FSM, Snyder told us about how the national portal has helped them overcome barriers in data flow between states, and that this has led to the completion of their SOE. So I think there's important lessons here for those countries that have outer islands or provinces where data tends to be siloed. So I might now see if we can bring here's the poll results, just come up now. So the first question was, have you read a recent State of Environment report and from a Pacific Island country? And 75% of you have said yes, 25% no. That's really pleasing to see. For those of you that are interested in checking them out, you can head to the Pacific Regional Data Portal. They're all there, or to the relevant national data portal. The second question was, do you regularly work with environmental data in your work? And 81% of you have said yes. So good to see there's a bunch of data users and managers listening to our session. And then the next question was, have you read a I'll start at the bottom. So were you aware of the national data portals? 70% of you said yes. So clearly that's pleasing, but we've got a little bit of work to do to get the story of the data portals out there. And the last question was, would you like to learn more about the data portals? And all of you said yes. So thanks to everyone who completed the polls. There's some good insight there. So that brings us to the end of the side event. I'd just like to thank our moderator, Director Easter Chu-Shing, and our panel team, Paul, Richard, and Snyder, for your really interesting insights from all across the Pacific. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and look forward to hopefully seeing you all in the Pacific soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Easter, Richard, Snyder.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.